kona mauka o makono no ua rea ali bo lena halena I te waie le ia ke o kalunu Aoki no pu ki kama Aoki ko olau pua wahine kaya ulu ola o ki vai atana ulu ikahi mea iki una makauna ai ka Julio aloha.
Aloha everyone, welcome to Hawaii, you're all here. So on behalf of the Center for Language and Technology and the National Foreign Language Resource Center, we would like you to be welcome to the University of Hawaii at Manoa. As we gather here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, it's important to recognize that we're not just meeting on a campus. We're meeting on the ancestral lands of the Kanaka Oiwi, the native Hawaiian people. As grateful inhabitants of these lands, we would like to invite you to honor and consider signing the Pono Pledge, which is a commitment to live with awareness and aloha while in Hawaii.
E ku I ka pono ke kipa I Hawaii.
I pledge to be pono on the island of Hawaii.
E nānea I ka ikena, a ole hoi e ki I helehewa I ka hikule ana ole.
I will mindfully seek wonder, but not wander where I do not belong.
E nihi ka hele na I ka uka o puna, mai pula le ka ike akamaka.
I will not defy death for breathtaking photos, trespass, or venture beyond safety.
E mālama ia ke kai a me ko honua, a e mahalo ia ko laila mau ola lohiu mai kahi mamau aku.
I will care for the land and the sea and admire wildlife only from afar.
Ho'ohihi ka maka I ke ahi a ka wahine, he ahi ena e aka hele ai.
Mountain lava will mesmerize me, but I will not disrupt its flow.
A ole e kā ili ia kāhai, e waiho ia ka pōhaku, a me kione I kona wahi pono I.
I will not take what is not mine, leaving lava, rocks, and sand as originally found.
E nāna pono I ke kai, a ole e huli kua ia.
I will heed ocean conditions, never turning my back to the Pacific.
Ke loka mai ka ua I uka, e awa I a wai maka ole.
When rain falls inland, I will remain high above ground out of rivers and streams.
He ali I ka aina, he kawa ke kanaka.
I will embrace the concept of being a steward of the land, revered as my loving chief.
E apo I ke ao a ohana, a e oi mau kana awao.
Those who apply their teachings increase their knowledge.
So now we would like to welcome to the stage Dr. Nickolai, President of IALLT.
Can you reach me?
I can. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mahalo, Julio. Thank you. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here for FLEAT. FLEAT is a joint conference that's hosted by both IALLT and IALLT. And actually, we have another distinguished guest here, Yuchi Ono, who I'd like to invite to the stage, who is here on behalf of IALLT, our sister organization. Yuchi, would you join me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Yuchi. I am here, of course, in my role as president of IALLT to welcome you to FLEAT 8. You may have noticed the tagline for this conference is ohana, which means family, of course, but the sense is much broader in Hawaiian. It's your extended family, it's your community. It's all of you. So here we have something in IALLT. We always talk about each other as family. You hear this, all the old timers, everyone's the old timers raising their, nodding their heads. We talk about each other as family. So ohana was the perfect tagline. And this family includes new arrivals, and you'll see if on your tag you have a gold bottom. These are all the people, the first time IALLTers here at the conference. So we welcome you. And also, you may have heard or noticed we have some people who are retired and continue to come to IALLT year after year. So in some ways, IALLT is like the Olive Garden. When you're here, you're family. But in another way, especially when we think of our elders, the old coots, as we call them, it's much more like Hotel California. But regardless, when you're here, you're family. I know you will all have a great conference. Every FLEAT conference is great. Every IALLT conference is great. You will be able to share your expertise, find collaborators, and network and connect. And I mean that in the most analog way possible. So thank you again to the University of Hawaii. I'm going to turn things back to Julio to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you and welcome.
All right. I am honored to introduce today's keynote speaker, Dr. Michele Anciaux Aoki. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. A remarkable international education and world language advocate. Michele's academic achievements include a BA in teaching English as a foreign language, an MA and PhD in Slavic linguistics, all of them from the University of Washington. But beyond her academic accomplishments, Michele has accrued an outstanding leadership track record in world language education. She was World Languages Program Supervisor in Washington State and International Education Administrator for the Seattle Public Schools. Thanks to her efforts, Washington State introduced the Seal of Biliteracy in 2014, a recognition that has been given to thousands of bilingual graduates, thus impacting thousands of students' lives. Michele's leadership accomplishments have been recognized with numerous awards, such as leadership awards from all those world language organizations that have so many letters and such long acronyms that is always difficult to remember. But among them are the Washington Association for Language Teaching, from the Consul General of Japan in Seattle, from the Pacific Northwest Council for Languages, from a major national advocacy organization, JNCL Nickolai, huge acronym, and from the National Council of the Less Commonly Taught Languages. This is my favorite one, Nickel. Just to name a few. One thing you may not know about Michele, besides that she takes really good selfies, I'm envious. You should see her Facebook. Is that she has a unique combination of expertise. She spent 2 decades working in the field of computer programming and system analysis before returning to what she calls her first love, language education. Sorry, Paul, you're not the first one. Michele's unique combination of technology insight and language expertise gives her a powerful perspective on the role that artificial intelligence could potentially have at the service of language education. And that's precisely the perspective that you'll hear more about today in her FLEAT 8 keynote, Language Learning in the Age of AI. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our dear friend and colleague, Michele Aoki.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. I think I'll just stand here and smell myself. Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Here's a clicker.
Okay. I think this is still on. Good. And please let me know if you find that you can't hear me, because mics wander away sometimes. So I will try to keep track of this one like I do my grandchildren. So it is truly an honor to be here, just to be here at all in Hawaii with these wonderful organizations and at this wonderful event. And I was especially honored to be invited to come back to do a keynote. I had the opportunity to give my first keynote to IALLT, I think it was 2019 when we were in Eugene, Oregon. And that was about my work in Washington State around competency-based credit testing and how that had really revolutionized the recognition of less commonly taught languages, because it became a way for all children in all languages to be recognized by something that is valued in the education field, which is the high school transcript, right? Credits. And so I retired shortly after that one, actually, and this is what I'll be talking about today has become kind of my retirement passion, passion project. Wonderful collaborators, other mostly retired people who have time. And probably the main thing, if any of you have worked for state agencies or even colleges for that matter, or districts, there are a lot of limitations on what you can say and do. But when you're retired, you can just be yourself. So I loved that video at the beginning about Pono and thinking about how we value the land. And I think it's the same idea with our languages. And so what I'll be talking about today is really about this mindset where we are valuing and wanting to find a place for all languages and all learners. So I think the place to begin, and what I like to begin with, is revisiting who we are as language learners. Where did we learn our languages? What did we speak at home? Where did we live? What was around us? And so on. What did we learn maybe in college or in school? And what have we chosen as adults to continue to learn? Because language learning can be a lifelong effort, right? So I invite you to take about a minute to find a shoulder partner or elbow partner, I guess they call it. And just, you don't have to do all the questions, but just have a little conversation, introduce yourselves from this perspective. Who are you as a language learner? Okay. Oh, I love how you're so engaged. If you see my hand, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure that many of us, especially those of us from the mainland, would answer the question, what language was the dominant language where we grew up? So let's take care of that one. If English was the dominant language where you grew up, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, but look at all the other languages. So what were some of the other languages? Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Italian, French, Turkish, Czech, wonderful, Arabic. Was it Swedish? Okay, and Korean, yes, oh, and many, many more, correct? So I presume that many of you who grew up in those areas where those languages were dominant also had your schooling in those languages. Is that correct? How many of you were fortunate enough to experience schooling in more than one language during, let's say, your K-12? Wow, that's wonderful. And how many of you studied languages in college? Probably a lot, I would suppose. Now, how many of you are still learning languages today that maybe you hadn't studied earlier? See, it is a lifelong enterprise. So think for a minute, not even a minute, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, about how different the experiences are. The experience of just being born and having that language be part of your life. The experience of being introduced to a language in a formal setting, perhaps for the first time. Maybe you're in a very formal, let's say formulaic setting where a language class is being offered and you never, unfortunately, some of you know this favorite phrase of educators in the United States, I studied 2 years of Spanish in high school and I can't remember a word of it. Therefore, we don't need to teach languages in school because I didn't learn after 2 years, so that means no one can learn, right? And then how many of us have had that joy of figuring out that you are, just by being a human being, a natural acquirer of languages, that learning languages can be something you can enjoy your entire life. And for me, as now a retired person, I feel like it's one of my commitments to keeping my brain young, hopefully. So now that I'm retired, I have a full-time grandmother nanny job with my 2 grandchildren, and my 4.5-year-old granddaughter came home from school a couple of weeks ago when I was preparing for this keynote, and she said they had had Hawaii Day at school, and they had told them that the hula is not just a dance, but it is a story. And so that meant a lot to her because she loves stories. Of course, children do love stories and books. And so it made me think that I wanted to think about what I'm sharing with you today more as a story rather than here's just a bunch of facts or bullet points or do this, do that, whatever. So we're going to have a few chapters here about the story that I am sharing with you about language learning in the age of AI. So chapter 1. The world is changing, so must language learning. So I travel a lot, and recently I was planning a trip into Newark, and all the flights were getting canceled left and right. And actually en route to this trip, we were flying from Jacksonville into Atlanta, and sure enough, our flight got canceled, the connection to Seattle, so we spent the night in the airport. But when I read these articles about language programs being canceled, or language levels, like, okay, we'll continue doing Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, but we're just going to have to throw out Spanish 3. Or especially with languages like Japanese and Chinese, where the numbers for more advanced levels of classes often are small, and the principal says, sorry, out. Then it's like you've cut somebody off at the knees just when they were beginning to learn to walk in that language after maybe a year or 2 in high school. You just cut them off. No wonder they take 2 years and can't remember a thing of it, because they didn't have a chance to really explore the language and experience it long enough. So here's a little ChatGPT image, but I just imagine that canceled. And also the idea that, well, it's just about learning a foreign language, so why not just Spanish? Let's just do Spanish. We'll do Spanish for everybody. Why wouldn't everybody want to just learn Spanish? Not that Spanish isn't a great language, and I want you to know I've been spending the last, maybe 8 months on my Duolingo doing Spanish, so I do value it, but it shouldn't be the only one. And especially even, languages like Japanese and Chinese that almost started to count as like real languages in the school classrooms, and languages like German that were pretty strong for a long time and are really disappearing now, and Latin, for example. Then there are languages like Chukis or Korean actually is one of the few that's really having an uptake, fortunately. But Somali or Vietnamese or any number of languages. I happen to speak a lot from the Balkan Peninsula, so like Romanian or Bulgarian or Serbian, for example. Even Russian, which was very highly supported when I went to college, is very little supported now. So this is part of the challenge that we're facing. What can we do about that? And so I did ask ChatGPT and about this paradox of the AI age. So, people say now, you hear people saying this even if AI can translate everything, then why do we need to learn languages? And ChatGPT said, the rebuttal to that is that we don't stop walking just because we drive cars. And I think that's very helpful. Thank you, ChatGPT, for that insight. So why learn languages? Because languages are not just a bunch of words and grammar. Language is what makes us human. And I want to give credit to our wonderful colleague from Avant Assessment, Victor Santos, who has written this award-winning book, which I can tell you young children really enjoy. It's like a guessing game. What makes us human? In the end, you find it is language. So we have to start by, don't let anybody tell you we don't need languages because we have AI. But the reason we need languages may be different than it used to be. We don't need language learning to do rote translation of routine stuff. But we do need language to make connections, to care about each other, to really know our cultures, our wealth, our arts, our histories, our ideas, our beliefs, all of those things. So, chapter 2, I'm going to introduce you to Phil, which we consider a human-centered or human-centric alternative to how we've been doing language instruction, especially in the United States. I can speak for that, but I think a lot of countries have had similar challenges. So what is this idea? Phil is facilitated interdependent language learning. The concept is pretty simple. What if the students themselves were choosing the languages they were going to learn in a language classroom? And what if the role of the teacher was not to be the language expert for 10 languages, or even just one language, but to facilitate the process for the students to understand how to set goals, to learn what they want to learn and need to learn in the language that they are interested in, to get access to resources to learn that language, to make connections to community members who might be virtual or in-person language partners for them, and to help them determine whether they're achieving the goals that they have for learning a language. And so the simple concept is one class, many languages, one facilitator. That's kind of the idea. So where did this idea come from? Well, a bunch of us, mostly retired people, had been meeting back starting in about fall of 2019. And then you remember what happened in about February of 2020. At least it was February of 2020 in Seattle, where I lived. The pandemic happened and everybody started imagining, well, what can we do to deal with this reality of the pandemic and create opportunities? And it just made us a little more open. And we started hearing about, it was initially a teacher in California who had posted a question. He says, I'm doing a class called Language Lab where the students all choose their languages, and then I match them up with resources and da-da-da-da-da-dum, and I want to find some people that they can interact with. And we said, wow, that is super interesting. So we invited him to meet us on Zoom, of course, because we were already meeting by Zoom, but then it was COVID. So that was how people met and talked. And then we put out the word to our fellow supervisors for language around the country. And we found out that Wisconsin had already been doing a program similar to that for a number of years. And so we brought their folks in to talk to us about this. So what I want to get across is this was all human. It was before AI. It wasn't done because of COVID. It was some places that started exploring this possibility. And our job as our group, we call ourselves the NSSFL, which is National Council of State Supervisors for Languages, the neural network, because we just kind of get together every week by Zoom and talk about things happening in the language field and think about where things might go, who we need to talk to, how we could influence things, and so on. So we met with those folks and we viewed our role as reporting, sharing, being like journalists to explore these ideas. So what we found from looking in the conversations that we had with them was that we thought of Phil, we called it Phil, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, as being an approach, not a model. Like it's not like a model curriculum that you pull off the shelf and give to somebody and then now they can just go and open the book and teach it. It's really these concepts that the learners choose the language that they are going to learn, they set their own goals, and then they take agency and responsibility to achieve them. But the role of the teacher is to help facilitate it, make it easier for them to do so. So it's connecting them to resources, but it's also to use and apply all of their own knowledge and experience as experienced, in the case of K-12 education, certificated language teachers, about language acquisition, about language proficiency, about student motivation. They're using everything they know as language learners and teachers to help make that process happen. So it's not like, I've heard of programs where somebody is running a technology lab, the kids come in, maybe it's the library even, and they sit down at computers and they open up a program and they work and then they leave. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that has a very important human interaction component, but the source of the information about the languages may not be coming from that teacher. So, why did we call it interdependent? When we were first talking about it, we were calling it independent, facilitated independent language learning. And then we realized that doesn't really make sense because independence sort of implies that somebody just goes off and does it. And right now you can do it. I'm independently learning Spanish with Duolingo, for example. I don't have somebody facilitating that other than the app and me in my experience as a language learner and teacher. But what we were talking about was way more interconnected. We wanted the students who were in the classroom, even if they were learning other languages, to be supporting each other and strengthening intercultural connections. Because sometimes the best way to understand something about another culture is to compare it to a different culture. And there you are in an environment. It's sort of like, I think of some of those pictures of the sea where there's all kinds of turtles and porpoises and fish and octopi and whatnot floating around. That's part of what makes it a very rich environment. And so we wanted to see that kind of thing, and we felt that interdependent was a better way of getting that idea across. It's intentional in that sense. So we pulled all that information together, and the Center for Applied Linguistics, or CAL, how many of you have heard of CAL? Great. They're a wonderful organization in Washington, D.C. And they agreed to publish a brief on that. It wasn't terribly brief. It was long enough that we could really describe the two case studies that I described, that I shared with you, plus some of the insights that we were gaining about how this could be an interesting approach, and in particular, how it could address some of the things that have not been working well for learners. Learners are looking to have more agency in their learning, to have more choice. And if we don't do that, honestly, we're just going to lose a whole generation of students and not have a new generation of successful language learners and language users. So we published that brief, and it was quite well received. And so we're going to head into chapter 3 about what makes Phil different. So there are a number of benefits, as you can imagine, to the Phil approach. One is that the students themselves get personalized learning pathways. Now, that's different from differentiated instruction, where the teachers have a goal and then they decide that this is a variation of how to get to that goal, but they set the goals basically, and ultimately you want everyone to still get to the same place. That's different. This is the pathway itself. If we all headed out the door and started walking through this beautiful arboretum that is your campus, we would go in 100 directions, right? There's not one path we'd have to follow. We also would be developing lifelong learning habits. Is that important? I mean, why on earth do we waste 13 years of public school and send children to learn things that are only applicable to that confined environment? Maybe they're applicable to college, but they aren't the things that they really need to live their lives, to get jobs, to go on vacations, to participate in organizations, to do all of those great things. So we want to have them start developing the habits that give them something that will last a lifetime. And the intercultural competence, I already mentioned, the idea of being aware of different cultures every day. And part of the reason that I knew this approach really would work is that I was involved in starting an international school in Seattle in 2000. And in that school, we had made the intentional choice to offer dual language immersion, both in Spanish and in Japanese. But we launched the first year with Spanish in kindergarten and first grade. And the next year, we were supposed to start the Japanese program. And at first, some of the people were saying, oh my gosh, or some of the teachers, actually, the English side teachers in the upper grades, oh my gosh, that is too much. We can't possibly do that. It'll be confusing, But when we talked to the immersion teachers themselves, they were the ones that most favored it because they understood it would give a stronger foundation to the work they were doing if there were two cultures that were interrelated and could be sharing the whole space and the experiences for the students. And indeed, it is a marvelous experience. Just celebrated 25 years there, as a matter of fact. And the other key one for me is always more languages and more learners. And so we know that we cannot get more languages into the school day if we have to depend on 150 students in order to give a full day's work to a teacher. And of course, there are many, many languages that we would love to have students have a chance to learn that just don't have teachers, or there's very few of them, or they don't have certification, and so on. So if we want to open the door and begin to offer more opportunities for more languages, Phil is a way that we can do that. And similarly, we can meet the needs of a much more diverse group of learners. For example, heritage language speakers have never been well served in our traditional language programs because they come with a strong background, but each one is probably a little bit different. And so many programs, the minute a Spanish speaker appears, for example, and says, I don't read Spanish, well, of course they could read Spanish probably pretty easily, but they don't think they can. And they put them in first year Spanish, which is a disaster for them and certainly for the other students as well. So more languages, more learners. These are some of the benefits. There are many challenges and opportunities, and I'm not going to go into all of these, but if you read that first brief, you can see that we looked at each challenge was also an opportunity. So we had the opportunity, my colleague Tom Welch, who has been kind of our fearless leader, you could say, on Phil, from the Successful Neural Network Group. Tom and I were able to present at ACTFL. ACTFL is our national language organization in the United States and kind of the leading organization for the teaching and learning of languages, K-12 and in higher education as well. So it was a great honor to have our proposal accepted, and we had a chance to introduce it, and we had a very enthusiastic response. And what else happened in November 22? While we were at ACTFL, OpenAI announced the launch of ChatGPT. So while we were just sharing these initial ideas, which again were really focused on things that human beings were doing in classrooms, the possibility of having AI as an augment or to be part of the learning opportunity presented itself. So over the next year, our Necessful Neural group just stayed aware and identified many people, including IALLT, that started offering webinars, thinking about how educators could use AI. But what was really interesting was a fellow named Jerry Registra that we found that was talking about how learners could use ChatGPT as a way to tailor their language learning needs, to get the information they needed, to get feedback, to get questions answered, and ultimately to even carry on conversations. Now, of course, this is early 2023. A lot of these things are way beyond that now, and many apps already exist even to support those things. But that was some of our initial exploration. And you can imagine when we saw that title, AI just killed traditional language learning. So, okay, let me hear what that one's about. So, the next year, we had the chance to share what we had learned that year at the ACTFL conference. And this time we focused on the kinds of questions that we'd been getting through the couple of years about, oh, that sounds really great, but where on earth are you going to find resources for ASL or Hebrew or Greek or whatever language it is that the students are asking for? And so we collected a lot of ideas that people had, and it's a mix. You know, I think there's a place for things like learning apps. There's a place for, in some cases, maybe collaboration with a college and using a college textbook as a foundation. They've done that very successfully in Wisconsin. And then maybe there's a place for AI as well. And so we published the second brief that talks about resources. So both of these are publications that you can download for free and get way more details about what's already been happening and where things are going. Some of the characteristics that we identified that we felt would be important for resources that would really work well in a filled classroom included ones that are adaptable. Obviously, if you're trying to do something where the learner is in the center and their needs and goals are what you're really putting emphasis on, then the more that the materials can be adapted. Maybe there's a theme and there's some core vocabulary, but you can take it in a completely different direction. Like I know language teachers, for example, who have taken a theme like food and made it about healthy eating and compared lunchroom menus in the United States with lunchroom menus in France, for example. Catherine Usselin has talked a lot about that type of lesson, for example. So we want things that are adaptable. Ideally, it would be great if resources are free, and open educational resources certainly offer a lot of potential. The direction we're heading now is to see how can we see kind of a hub of these resources being created so that people, a school here in Hawaii and a school in Minnesota and a school in Florida might all have a student who wants to learn Hawaiian, for example, but can they tap into resources that Hawaii has already identified? So that's about human connection, right? I mean, it's just about us taking the time to become familiar with what each other's doing and sharing it. So trying to think of just as I think the message at the beginning is about thinking of the land more as a shared resource that we must care for and honor. And if we thought about languages that way, then we would also be inclined to share and make more open, more available all the resources you could have. And in particular, from my perspective, I always feel we should put a priority on the languages that we have not been generally teaching in our schools in the United States, so that they also have a place and know that they are valued. We also had a section in that brief about assessment options. So one of the things is that in this kind of environment, it's irrelevant to talk about having a quiz with so many points and you get an A, B, C or whatever, and it's based on knowing endings to verbs or the kinds of things that honestly traditionally have been a big part of foreign language classrooms. I'll call them foreign language maybe because that's kind of how we treated them at that time. So we are strong advocates, and this kind of goes back to the work that I had shared in 2019 when I was here for IALLT on competency-based credit testing, using external proficiency assessments as a way for both the teacher facilitator and the student, plus the educational system to see what the student is actually internalized in their language learning journey that they can demonstrate in a proficiency assessment and use that for determining, say, language credits. There may be other credits because they are exploring goal setting and doing projects and things of that sort that would make sense as if you need to have credits assigned for a specific class. But the language things, we're really interested in the development of proficiency. And we want to make sure that they're getting a chance to get a lot of formative, how they're progressing in the language. Coming soon, we're working on this topic of how you make the transition from teacher to facilitator. So we'll have more information about that coming up in the coming weeks. Some of what we've heard from our colleagues in Wisconsin that have been doing this model are that you need to build excitement about language learning. So first of all, there may be some just exploration about what does it mean to learn a language and what are different languages like and what would be appealing to you as the learner to decide that this is the language you want to learn. And the process of helping students choose a language, setting proficiency goals, and front-loading community building. So the time that the class is meeting together, that they are sensing themselves as a community of language learners, even if they are learning different languages. So chapter 4, here we are in the age of AI. And I want to say that I spent a lot of time over the last few weeks trying to think about how to talk about AI in a way that doesn't go too far in one direction or the other. There's so much to be excited about and intrigued about. And anybody, as Julio mentioned, I worked in technology for a number of years. My doctoral dissertation in the Slavic department was on word form recognition and generation, a computational approach to Russian morphology. So I've been interested in natural language processing for decades. I'd actually been involved in a project in Croatia where we built a search interface for their, I guess it's like their database of works of Croatian academicians. The problem in titles in a highly inflected language like Croatian is that if you look for girl, then you're not going to find girls, right? Only it's like 10 different forms. And so we could intercept a request, create the paradigm, and then go search for the individual possibilities so you'd get a more complete search. So I've been interested in this work since the 1980s, honestly. I never thought things would get to quite the point they are now, but it's exciting to see where could it go and what's possible on the positive side. And what we explored in the second brief that I mentioned with Cal was just providing an example, and we picked a couple of less commonly taught languages, Korean and Romanian, and we just posed a prompt that was like, here's a student who is in Nebraska and she's learning Romanian and she's at the novice mid, novice high level, something like that. And she's interested in the sustainable development goals, maybe equal access to education, for example. And what is an example of something that she could do to begin to use the language in this way? And so we did an example in Korean and Romanian. And what we did after we generated the examples is turn to our Korean and Romanian instructors at the University of Washington, say, would you look these over? And do you have any comments about the language? Like it's either inaccurate or it's not the best way to say it and so on. And they made some corrections, which we included in our appendix. So we wanted to model that it's not that you can just trust whatever spits out from ChatGPT, but on the other hand, something's being spit out and a lot of it's not bad. And so that's where you need to have that balance, but also eyes wide open. So just as an example in Romanian, you know, like where she's from, ChatGPT suggested vin din Nebraska, and the human translator said, well, probably in Romanian, they wouldn't say I come from, but they would say sunt din, I am from. it's not that it's ungrammatical, it's just kind of a choice of usage. And it might even vary, honestly, from region to region in Romania, as those things often are. But we wanted to, again, give the idea, we wanted to open the door so people would think to explore AI, but they would also not just assume that it's completely accurate or that you can just turn your back on it. What we need, obviously, is AI, large language models that are being, that have learning materials that really reflect a wide range of languages, reflect the values and so on that we think are appropriate for learners. So here's a picture of my colleague, Tom Welch, who just finished a portion of the Camino in Spain. And he's now been for a couple of months, or maybe 3 or 4 months now, been doing a Substack called Still Lighting Learning Fires. And in this, I've got this in the handout for this session. You can connect to any of his posts if you'd like to see them. But he talks a lot about Phil and has some good examples. I'll share a couple still. But he said, one lesson the Camino taught me, every journey is personal. There's no single right path, no universal pace, and no failure for not following someone else's map. Our students and our schools deserve that same flexibility. So that's kind of the mindset of Phil and where AI might be a good partner to make some of that happen. On the other hand, in discussing this with Tom, he said, well, maybe it's really the age of AI, friend and foe. It's a little like fire. It's a little like social media. It can be a very positive force, but there are also a lot of negative things that we need to be aware of. And so another colleague of mine, Emily Bender, who is director of the Computational Linguistics program at the University of Washington in Seattle, has just published with Alex Hanna this book, The AI Con. I just read it, listened to it on Audible, I should say, a couple of weeks ago. And there's so much about the amount of money being poured into AI, the creating of huge data centers, this relentless belief that somehow we can get artificial general intelligence and replace human beings. And, basically, she says, that's a lot of hype. It's a lot of hype. It's a lot of way to gather money and spend a lot of money. But that is not real. But there are probably other things that are real that we don't even know about. So I want to close with this idea of the family of language learners. And then in the spirit of ohana, what we would like to see is this kind of fostering of a family of language learners so that we make that family across our classrooms and our schools and our districts and our states and hopefully connect the whole world, but also that we bridge that gap that we never seem to be able to do very well between K-12 and higher education, so that we think of this all as the language learning enterprise and we find ways to better share our resources, our insights, our human ability to connect and so on, and also anything that we happen to generate that's helpful from AI. So there's a couple of really exciting things that have been developing in the last year. So as I mentioned, when we presented at the ACTFL convention, we put out the word of trying to create a Phil community. And if anybody's interested in implementing Phil, contact us. We would love to help you and talk about it and so on. And so Delaware, actually, the supervisor there, Greg Fulkerson, first brought together a group of teachers, introduced it to them, and there were some teachers who were very interested. And one of them, Ryan Allen, actually started a Phil class this last year. And he was a Spanish teacher. He's still teaching Spanish, but in his Phil class, he had 25 students this year and 10 different languages. And I believe he has about 40 requests for Phil for next year. And he had, at the end of his two-quarter class, I guess they're on a quarter system in their school, and they have a block schedule, so it's like the equivalent of a normal year. They went ahead and gave Avant stamp tests to their students, and many of the students were able to reach the level that they needed in order to get 2 credits high school credits in the language so that they could meet the graduation requirement or the college admissions requirements. Some students didn't reach that across all skills, but then they knew I need to do more in listening was actually the major one that they needed more work in. So it was very informative. And for a very first pilot, it was quite amazing to see those results. And he's going to share here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Michele, for inviting me to share some thoughts and ideas on using AI, specifically ChatGPT, in language learning. Since I discovered it in May 2023, I've used ChatGPT in a variety of ways. One of the simplest but most powerful uses is for brainstorming instructional ideas. For example, I'll ask it to generate a table of activities on whatever topic or theme we're covering, listing something such as Gardner's multiple intelligences, Bloom's taxonomy, or the actful language functions in the first column, with reading, writing, speaking, and listening across the top. And I'll ask it to fill in the table with a variety of activities. This gives me instant inspiration that's easy to customize, and I often use the activities to create choice boards for end of lesson or end of unit performance tasks. Content generation is another one of my favorite uses of ChatGPT. I'll generate short stories, nonfiction articles, and dialogues for both my Spanish class and my Phil class. In fact, my dissertation focused on using ChatGPT to create personalized stories for each student in one of my Spanish 2 classes. The stories were based on their interests, experiences, genre preferences, and reading proficiency, as measured by the STAMP test. So I surveyed the students to get that info. I compiled that info into a reader profile, uploaded the reader profile along with a list of the vocab we'd covered in class so far, and prompted ChatGPT to generate a story aligned with those two at a desired length. What I found was exciting. Students who read these personalized stories understood and enjoyed them more than peers who read commercially available leveled readers, even when controlling for STAMP reading proficiency scores. The personalization really tapped into their background knowledge and interests, helping them make use of a wider range of socio-cognitive reading strategies. We also use ChatGPT as a research and discovery tool. Students use it to explore music, art, and culture from target language countries, often in place of a traditional Google search. Perhaps my all-time favorite use of ChatGPT is discovering new music that I otherwise would never have found. I recently found my current favorite band, Diamante Electrico, a rock band from Colombia that kind of sounds like the Arctic Monkeys. I had asked ChatGPT to give me some Spanish language albums that sound like early 2000s Incubus, and Diamante Electrico was one of them that popped up. Their live album from 2021 is really great, and so if you're looking for new music, I highly recommend it. And really quick, 2 other ways that I've used ChatGPT are to provide feedback and to simulate interpersonal communication. For giving feedback, I've coached students to upload ACTFL rubrics, guidelines, the can-do statements, along with samples of their own work, and ask for suggestions on how to fix some errors, how to sound more natural, or simply to increase their proficiency level. And finally, ChatGPT's ability to simulate interpersonal communication, either by text or voice, is surprisingly effective, especially for practicing everyday conversations. It gives students a way to practice speaking out loud or writing without feeling judged. So hopefully you're enjoying the conference. Thanks again to Michele for the invitation to talk to you all, and thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And then the final thing I want to share is our colleague from the University of Washington Language Learning Center, Russell Hugo, has been involved with IALLT for many years. Unfortunately, like many universities, they just cut all travel this year, so he wasn't able to come to the conference this year. But he has initiated a Phil class in higher education, and we've been working on it for several months. It's also in collaboration with the linguistics department, which is providing the course codes for it, and the School of International Studies, Jackson School, which has some funds that they can use to pay for some native speakers of the languages that they'll be looking to offer in that way. So I'm going to just switch right to his video so you can hear him talk about it.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for letting me share a few words about our upcoming Phil pilot. Really excited and grateful to everyone's support, especially Michele, for her guidance as we develop the program. There are a few main reasons we're looking forward to the program, and I'll share some highlights here. One is we're hoping to provide access to super less commonly taught languages. some of those that are just not available anywhere on our campus, but also at a lot of other universities. So especially our local indigenous languages, that's a key thing we're hoping to support. We're also looking to enhance options for advanced and specialized education for graduate students or other students who have special projects that otherwise are maybe too niche or tangential from standard language education, or maybe go beyond what would be available for some under-resourced language programs. So maybe want advanced study or language for specific purposes, things that are really aligned with research projects or majors. Also, we hope to grow new programs. I mean, this is a long-term goal, but the thought would be that for programs, we don't necessarily have funding to create an entire professor track or instructor track. We could at least support heritage populations and then demonstrate that the value and the need is there, both to the university, the outside community, and the rest. And then also to sustain existing programs. So sometimes there are courses that are offered 101 for the first year and then 201 the second year, meaning that other students who their timeline may not align with the program and they may miss out on that track. And so this is a way to maybe fill in the gap with those students who need to continue that continuity of learning. And then also we hope to develop open educational resources and also start to encourage students to grow their peer teaching skills as well. So we're going to be including a capstone as a final project that will likely be for many students to develop an OER, and even for beginning students to develop very simple ones that could be used for students down the road, both in our program and elsewhere for some of these languages. So this is an exciting, a little nervous. There's a lot of factors and variables here at play, but we're really grateful to all the work that folks like Dr. Michele Aoki and the other folks at the Center for Applied Linguistics and other individuals around the U.S. and elsewhere in the world who have been testing this. So I'm really grateful to them sharing their knowledge with us. Have a great rest of the talk. Thank you.
So what's next? So thinking back on who you are as language learners, could you imagine yourself being a Phil language teacher facilitator? Because we're going to need a bunch of those kinds of people. So if you're interested in joining our Phil family, our Phil community, you can email phil4 with the number 4 WLS at gmail.com. That is answered by Tom Welch. We'd invite you to do that. And I also want to just give acknowledgments to our Phil team from the Necessful Neural Group, as well as Necessful, Cal, and the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, which has very much helped us with the information from the Wisconsin programs. And of course, the National Foreign Language Resource Center. Thank you for inviting us today. And if you have questions, I know we're about out of time, please just email me. And in this QR code is a resource doc that has links to many of the things, the Cal publications and other things like that that you can use. And if you email me questions, I will post responses there, so everybody will be able to see them during the conference. And thank you so much for your attention and for offering me the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you.